Hi, this week I'd like to talk to you about an article that I found because a friend of mine linked it via Facebook. It was written by Mauricio Estrella, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Mauricio, and posted on the NBC Today website. He talks about the need to change his password. He works at a company where they have a mandatory policy where your password needs to be changed every few months. And he found himself in the unusual nexus of having to change his password and also going through a divorce. He chose to make his password forgive at H3R, which in his mind stood for forgive her. As Mauricio explains, I had to type this statement several times a day. Each time my computer would lock, each time my screensaver with her photo would appear, each time I would come back from eating lunch alone. In my mind, I went with the mantra that I didn't type a password. In my mind, I wrote forgive her every day for 1 month. That simple action changed the way I looked at my ex-wife. That constant reminder that I should forgive her led me to accept the way things happened at the end of my marriage and embrace a new way of dealing with the depression that I was drowning into. Now, I like this for two reasons. First of all, as a former member of the Safety Net Project at the National Network to End Domestic Violence, I was a champion of robust passwords changed frequently. This is an important part of online security. Also, if you can swing it, getting a password manager such as AgileBit's 1Password, which is my own personal favorite, is a great idea. It takes off the heavy lifting of having to think of passwords and having to manage them. Very important. But that's sort of a side note. The other reason I like this is that it's a wonderful example of a male taking responsibility for his feelings, taking emotional responsibility in the wake of a divorce or breakup of a relationship to not trash his partner, to not get caught in depression, but to actually confront it and deal with it. It's a brilliant solution. But on a deeper level, given our conversation here about primary prevention, think about it. I know in my own training, being raised as a heterosexual male in this culture, the paradigm when a relationship ended, regardless of why, was more often trashing the female, calling her all sorts of names, and in particular, telling ourselves or being told by peers, both male and female, that the way to get over the relationship was just to go out and sleep with as many people as possible. I mean, basically, getting laid is the heterosexual male solution to whatever pain and heartache you might be going through in the wake of a breakup or a divorce. But here's a guy admitting that this was painful. Not only painful, that part of that pain was anger, which, is natural, but that he had to take responsibility for himself to actually forgive. We have a paradigm in this culture, misogyny we call it, of course, where we tell men that emotions are things that belong to women. Feelings, it's another F word, right? Feelings are feminine, we say, and not only that, but they make women less than human, or certainly less than men, because they have them. Now, this is ridiculous, of course. Women have feelings because they're human beings, and feelings are human things. But by walling them off in this sort of feminine garden, we have A, dehumanized women, and of course when you dehumanize somebody, you pave the way towards justifying all sorts of violence against them. And B, we've also walled ourselves off as men on the outside. We've separated ourselves from our own humanness, from the fullness of our own lived experience. Now, some people may sort of marginalize this or say, oh, come on, what are you saying? That if only men learned how to cry, we'd end violence? Or even more so, great, here we are talking about violence against women and you come along and try to make it all about men and their feelings again. Well, yes and no. It's not all about men. Absolutely there are issues we need to talk about that concern women. But when we're talking about ending violence against women, which predominantly is perpetrated by males, the irony is that we need primary prevention. And a big component of primary prevention, getting back to point number one, is, yes, I think if men learned how to cry, we would be further on the path towards ending violence. Not a magic solution, but definitely further down the path. We need to look at underlying causes. And I'd say, yes, this is one of the underlying causes. If we raised a generation of males that was more emotionally literate, we would have less violence. How do we do this? Well, draw upon my own experience. In my many years at Men Stopping Rape, 4 years into my tenure, one of my colleagues turned around one day and said, well, this is great that we do all this prevention work, going out and talking to other men in the community, but what are we doing for us? How do we further and deepen the work for ourselves? How do we learn to really truly trust other men? These were great questions. A bunch of us said, good questions, let's try to figure it out. We formed what we called the ESG, or Emotional Support Group. There were a core group of us that stuck with us for 6.5 years. During that time we met every month, sometimes twice a month when we could. And we met for several hours and we just worked with each other. It was experimental. We brought in some methods and some techniques, and we brought in some teachers to help us with it. We created a space where men could truly listen to each other, support each other, and be vulnerable with each other. And what we found was that we craved this connection with other men, that it was entirely possible to be vulnerable and not lose our sense of self, not lose the respect of our male peers. It changed the way in which we related to each other. It changed the way in which we viewed our relationships with women, with colleagues, with parents. It gave us paradigms and models and tools for how to manage our own emotions, for how to be responsible for our own emotions, for how to express what we were feeling, deal with it, and manage it, and not have it always be someone else's responsibility, or not have it blow up, metaphorically or otherwise, in someone else's face. Now, I wish I could give you all sorts of data to prove this or to substantiate it or some sort of model that the CDC would like. I don't. We didn't do research back then. We didn't do evaluation. We were too busy doing the work, and we didn't have the capacity or the funding to do evaluation. What I can tell you anecdotally is that, again, this work changed our lives, and I've personally felt as a male in this movement that that was central to my fundamental understanding of violence as the role it played in my life, and my understanding of what it means to be an ally, a true ally, to women in the movement, to people in the LGBTQ movement, to people of color, and to be doing social justice work in general. This is something I want the movement to really move forward on. We have the tools, we have the ability, but unless we pay attention to this and create this sort of space for men, we are not going to have men truly change, truly transform, and we're not going to have them become true allies. And when I say we, I'm pointing the finger at men and 3 fingers back at myself. This is work that men need to take the initiative on, with the support and understanding of our female allies, and the understanding that it is part of the fuller picture of ending violence as a whole. This is some of the stuff we need to overcome. Emotional work is important because it's been absent, because we've had the privilege of not having to do it, because we swim in water of male privilege and misogyny. This is water.